What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if every hot girl in school wanted Naruto? But he had a dangerous secret. If you enjoy this video then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. The battle was over. Gato was dead, throat cut and body tossed off the bridge. The boat bearing the thugs had departed, taking the few survivors with it. And surrounded by the bodies of enemies he slew lay Zabuza, dying. But he wasn't quite dead yet. As the snow began to fall, Zabuza beckoned Naruto over to him. "Look, kid, I gotta be straight with ya. I don't like you, nor do I want to do this. But it has to be done. Tradition, ya might say. Not only that, but a sword should always be used. Reach into my pocket and grab out the scroll there." Naruto, kneeling down next to the dying missing nin, complied. The scroll was covered in markings that he had never quite seen before. He quickly passed it off to Zabuza, confused about the whole situation. "Ya see, kid, whenever a swordsman of the mist loses his last fight, and is getting ready to move on to the next world, he has to give his sword to the person who bested them. Though you yourself didn't actually strike me down, out of all your team. You're the one who deserves it the most. Kakashi would never use it, and you're the only genin who's shown that you knew what it meant to be a ninja." As he spoke, Zabuza lit up with the last vestiges of his chakra, and activated the sealing matrix on the scroll. His sword, which had been resting against the scroll, looked like it got sucked into it by a vacuum. "There, take it." And with that, Zabuza expired. Naruto stood up, holding the oddly small scroll. "But, I don't know how to use a sword. What the hell am I going to do with this?" In Naruto's mind, a fierce argument raged. Swords are cool. Swords are awesome. Look at how cool I would look if I could use a huge-ass sword. Sakura-chan would love me for sure. On one side, Naruto thought the idea of becoming a swordsman to be a pretty nifty one. After all, he didn't have a really cool bloodline or anything to make himself stand out. But everyone could know him because of his kick-ass swordsmanship. Plus, if Zabuza using water clones to make 10 more of him became that much deadlier. How effective would it be when Naruto made 100 clones? On the other side, was Naruto's love of ninjutsu. He loved ninjutsu. There was nothing more kick-ass than someone waving their hands around, and then causing a fireball to appear. It was like that magician he saw back on his 6th birthday. The guy could pull rabbits out of hats. How cool was that? Maybe, if Naruto got good enough with ninjutsu, he could do the same thing too? It was tough for Naruto to decide what he wanted to train in next, swords or ninjutsu. So, as they traveled home from Wave, all Naruto could do was pester Kakashi to train him. Unfortunately, Kakashi's reply killed Naruto's dream of being an awesome swordsman who could pull rabbits out of fireballs. It takes way too much training to become good with swords. Do you want to make that your only focus? In his head, Naruto could picture it. Ninjutsu, or kenjutsu. A chibi Naruto appeared over his left shoulder. "Swords. You have a kick-ass sword already. How hard can it be to learn to swing it around? You'll have mastered it in no time, and then Sakura-chan will like you. It's how those things work, I think." Naruto's smile grew, ready to reply to Kakashi in the affirmative for swords, when another chibi Naruto appeared over his right shoulder. "Screw swords. Ninjutsu is where it's at. You've seen the things that ninjutsu can do. Fireballs and lightning bolts and ice needles and all sorts of cool stuff." The argument was fierce. Which one would make him a cooler ninja? As the rest of the team walked, no one even suspected a miniature war was going on around Naruto's head. But, the ninjutsu Naruto had used Kage Bunshin, while the sword Naruto assaulted them all with his sword. It was a 5-minute miniature battle. But in the end, only one Naruto remained. Just think, Naruto. Sakura likes Sasuke, right? It's not because he can use a sword. It's because he has ninjutsu. And that made up Naruto's mind. Unfortunately, Naruto was still in the mindset that Kakashi would eventually teach him some kick-ass ninjutsu. After arriving back in Konoha, Naruto reached his apartment. "Well, what am I going to do with you?" He wanted to do something with the sword, though. It's what Zabuza would want. "Well, I suppose I can give y'all over to someone who does use swords." That's a good idea, I guess. He just needed to find someone who actually used swords, first. Do I even know anyone who actually fights with swords? Or seriously uses a weapon? Besides those random Anbu, they all have ninja too. Naruto, pay attention. This is news you'd probably love to hear. Missions went on as usual, with Naruto still stumped on who he could give his sword to. Sorry, Kakashi-sensei, what were you saying? For those of us who weren't listening the first time I said it, I decided to nominate you three for the Chunin exams. Chunin exams? Naruto didn't know much about the Chunin exams. But, it sounded exciting, right? Plus, maybe, sensei, will there be lots of other teams from Konoha there? Seeing as this year they're being held in Konoha, I'd guess yes. Score, I'm bound to find somebody who specializes in weapons somewhere in the exams. Well, none of the old academy class seems to be holding any actual weapons. It was before the first exam, with the Rookie 9 being reunited for the first time since they graduated. Naruto spent a lot of time looking around, which some took to mean he was nervous. That was rather far from the truth. Indeed, Naruto was looking for somebody anybody from Konoha who might be a weapons user. And he didn't find nary a one. None had more than just some kunai or shuriken. Unless they were hiding their weapons in scrolls, too, none of them specialized in weaponry. I'd keep your voices down. This isn't some kind of field trip, ya know? But Naruto was optimistic. He knew there'd be lots of opportunities for him to find a swordsman somewhere in the exam from Konoha. He just had to find them, is all. Shit. Man, what I wouldn't do for that giant sword now that I've been swallowed by a snake. I could totally cut my way out of it if I had it. But I might as well go with what I'm good at. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Well, if he was ever on the list before, Sasuke is definitely off it now. If he's stabbing himself in the leg with kunai, who knows what he would do with Zabuza's sword. Guess I gotta go in there and save the day. Wait, open both the scrolls at the same time. As the scrolls unrolled, Naruto recognized them. Immediately after he recognized, he shouted out. Toss them away, they're summoning scrolls. Poof, Iruka-sensei? Sweet, a tournament. Hey. Now I'll find someone for sure. Of course, after thinking that, Naruto was in for some disappointment. Well, we've gone through a bunch of matches so far. I already knew Sasuke doesn't use weapons. Shino's too caught up with his bugs. That stretchy dude totally sucked. Sakura and Ino, both of them don't seem to be the, type, to use big-ass swords. It has nothing to do with them completely lacking in, fighting skill. So, who's up next? That Tenten girl? She's the one on Jijimayu's team, right? Naruto was stunned. That was amazing. She pretty much solely used weapons. And even better, she didn't even seem to have a melee weapon yet. Ye gods, she's perfect. Everyone watching turned to Naruto, who had accidentally exclaimed his last thought out loud, after watching Tenten fight solely using weaponry. What are you all staring at? No one in the surrounding crowd knew what he was talking about. Most in the crowd, Tamari included, naturally assumed the boy was talking about her, seeing as she won the fight. But a few, like Neji and Hinata, noticed who he was staring at when he shouted. Well, Kakashi told me to meet up with that closet pervert. But I have something more important to do first. Then I'll find the pervert and make him train me. Let's see, I'll go visit Lee in the hospital and ask him where she normally trains at. It was after the preliminaries and Kakashi blowing him off. Stupid Kakashi. Man, I need to find someone to teach me how to use some ninjutsu. Hopefully the closet pervert will. Naruto made his way over to the hospital, searching for Lee's room. Guy-sensei. Lee. Guy-sensei. Lee. Well, looks like I found the room. Naruto stepped in, and immediately turned away from the horrible vision before him. Can I talk to Lee for a second? Naruto, what are you doing here? Naruto had walked into what would usually be a rather odd scene, but was probably normal for the two involved. Guy stood up from where he had been hugging Lee, who was lying down on the hospital bed. Thank God that's over. I just wanted to know where that Tenten girl on your team would be right now. I have a gift for her. Yup, Zabuza said a sword should always be used. That's why I had to give it to someone who will use it. A gift? Well, Tenten should be out over at the training grounds around now. I'll give you directions. Naruto wants to give Tenten a gift, Sounds like someone's springtime of youth is in full bloom. Okay, Tenten, that'll be it for the day. I had to go and attend my duties at home now, anyway. I'll see you Tom. What the hell are you doing here, loser? Just as Neji was finishing up his goodbyes to Tenten, who was gathering up all of her loose weapons, Naruto arrived onto the scene. "Shut up, Neji. I'm not here to kick your ass. Yet, then what are you doing here?" Tenten, who had gathered up all of her weapons using her wires, walked over to the two. She was curious about what the strange dead last was doing here, as well. As she spoke, Naruto quickly looked over at Tenten and smiled. A huge, dazzling smile, that was almost, but not quite, on the order of Lee's. So it was pretty high up there. "Here, I have this for you." Naruto quickly pulled out the scroll and stuffed it into Tenten's hands. "Use it well." With that, he ran away. With the way the sun was setting, though, it made him look like he was blushing. Neji and Tenten looked at each other. "Well, it looks sort of like one of my weapon summoning scrolls. Only a heck of a lot fancier. You might as well open it up out here. He is infamous for pranks, so perhaps it would be better if whatever went off out here." Okay, oh holy crap, how did such an enormous sword fit into such a tiny scroll? Tenten, are you crying? Neji, this is one of the 7 swords of Kirigakure. This is an honest-to-God sword of one of the mist swordsmen. This is one of the best swords in the world. How did that guy get it? I have no clue. And why did he give it to me? Yup, that sword will go to good use. Now, to go find that closet pervert. Naruto ran from the scene, leaving a stunned Neji and Tenten behind. The setting sun caused the whole scene to be even more dramatic. Words swiftly got around town, i.e. guys started yelling about Naruto and Tenten's springtime of youth everywhere he went. That Naruto wanted to give Tenten some kind of gift. When people actually saw what the gift was, well, most of them were confused. It's hard to miss the girl carrying the Zanbato, with tears in her eyes, as she walks down the street, after all. I mean, I can understand she's a ninja girl and all. But when did kids change so much that if you wanted to tell a girl you're interested in her, you give her a sword? Whatever happened to flowers? Or jewelry? Of course, it just so happened to be the members of Team 8 who heard that last conversation, prompting Kiba to loudly wonder at what kind of idiot gives a girl a sword to show her that they like her. Nobody answered him, though a bunch of the adults looked at him funny. After the team went their separate ways, Hinata went home, only to encounter a frustrated Neji, who was, unfortunately for Hinata, venting his frustration out loud. Stupid Uzumaki, I bet you this is exactly why he gave Tenten that sword. He knew that she'd get too involved with training herself in how to use it, so she wouldn't be able to train with me. Arg, now I'm going to have to figure it out all on my own. Naruto gave Tenten a sword? And didn't that old man say that boys give girls they like swords? It would be an hour before a branch family member found the unconscious form of Hinata on the floor. So the month of training went. Naruto met Jiraiya and learned about frog summoning. He didn't really think about Tenten at all, not really knowing the girl. He just hoped she did the sword justice or something like that. Tenten spent the entire month training in learning how to use the sword. She knew it must have some kind of secret property. All the 7 mist swords do. She just couldn't figure it out. But she did get a good handle on how to use it, though. Neji was freaking pissed as hell the whole month, due to his lack of a training partner. He was unable to learn Kaden for that same reason. And he blamed it all on Naruto. He made it very clear to everyone he came across that he would get back at Naruto, too. Unfortunately, he never really specified what he was going to get back at Naruto for. All he would ever talk about is Naruto giving Tenten that sword, and that it enraged him. Most people took that to mean that Neji was also interested in Tenten, and that Naruto had stolen her from him. Rumors traveled quickly in Konoha, and by the end of the month, the story had evolved into something out of a crappy romance novel. And, oddly enough, most people seemed to side with Naruto here. Because he was the one who gave Tenten a priceless gift, to try to win her love. Most people, i.e. the women of Konoha, saw that as an incredibly romantic gesture, or perhaps just the kunoichi of Konoha, as the civilian girls could appreciate the gesture, but they wanted it clear that they preferred jewelry, and that it must be Naruto's human side showing through. And that kind of thing should always be encouraged. Tenten kept on wondering about all the weird looks people were giving her, and how a lot of random people she didn't know kept on asking her about Naruto. She didn't even know the guy. She for sure didn't know why he gave her the sword, much less how he got it. Naruto was a puzzle to Tenten. She barely knew the guy. They hadn't ever even spoken. Then he, out of nowhere, gives her a priceless gift in the form of a sword, and proceeds to disappear. She didn't know what to think. She'd always been a no-nonsense, serious kunoichi, not one of those love-struck fangirl types. But now, she was pretty confused. At first, it was weird, but she got most of her advice from a drunken Hinata. She didn't quite know why Hinata was drunk so often lately, only that she was. Hinata also quite often stalked Tenten around, looking pretty angry. Or as angry as Hinata can get. So it was actually kind of cute, and fairly funny. When Tenten would confront the drunken Hinata, Hinata would usually start mumbling stuff about Naruto. Hinata would say stuff about how he never gives up, and always keeps on trying, and usually she'd say something about how Tenten should see how long Naruto can go without stopping. Well, Tenten never thought it was good advice. Hinata just kept on telling her random things. After a while of this going on, Tenten decided that she needed someone other than a drunken 12-year-old to get advice from. So, she hunted down Naruto's female teammate, one Haruno Sakura. At first, Tenten found it creepy that the townsfolk would watch her wherever she went. But, after a week of it, she got used to it, and ignored it. So when her first conversation with Sakura was eavesdropped on by no less than 20 people, she didn't even notice. "Hey, you're Sakura, right? Uzumaki Naruto's teammate?" Sakura, who had been having lunch at a small luncheonette, sighed. "Yeah, so, what did Naruto do to you? Interrupt your training? Steal your ramen? Play a prank on you? What?" Sakura didn't really have much faith in Naruto, it seems. No, nothing like that. I just have a few questions. You know, like where he got this from?" And, with that, Tenten removed Kabikari Houcho from its scroll. Sakura's eyes bugged out at first. She most definitely recognized that. She knew that Naruto had it. But she hadn't thought Naruto would give it away. Sakura was hurt, a little. She knew Naruto decided that he would use ninjutsu over kenjutsu, and that he had been looking for someone to give the sword to. But he hadn't even offered it to her. Suddenly, Sakura lost her appetite. But she should at least answer that girl's question. Sakura didn't even question her sudden dislike of Tenten. Well, Naruto was given the sword by its previous owner Momochi Zabuza at the end of our mission in Wave Country. But, I had to go. Bye. Tenten could only look on in confusion as Sakura seemingly ran away. Tenten wasn't an idiot. She could feel the sudden hostility that had built up in Sakura when she saw the sword. Hostility and jealousy? Man, things were getting more and more confusing. It didn't help that Hinata made an appearance right after that, to insult Sakura for her mistreatment of Naruto-kun. Tenten and Neji's only interaction during the month of training also revolved Hinata, when Hiyashi would send Neji out to find his missing daughter. Hiyashi had yet to realize who had been stealing his sake, but when he found out, there'd be hell to pay. Neji was pragmatic. He also hated having his training interrupted. So, he usually hunted down and retrieved Hinata in the fastest, most efficient manner. Neji would just find Hinata, pick her up, and walk away with her, usually without any warning. He'd then carry her back to the Hyuga compound, seeing as Hinata was usually too drunk to walk. He thought it was a perfectly reasonable way of handling the situation. Hinata clearly couldn't make it back herself, and probably wouldn't even want to. But, he had his own orders, and those orders were to bring Hinata back. And then he'd get to continue training so he could kick Uzumaki's ass even harder. Unfortunately, the village gossip vine took this the completely wrong way. All they ever saw was an angry Neji carrying around a struggling Hinata. The plot thickened. Now, Neji was somehow getting back at Tenten and Naruto by kidnapping his cousin, to have his way with her. Lots of people in the village were aware of the Hyuga girl's infatuation with Naruto. Or they were after they heard Hinata drunkenly mumble about it as she wandered around town. So it seemed obvious to them that Neji was trying to get back at Naruto for stealing Neji's, woman. To them, it seemed as if Neji was a villain, trying to break apart the lovers for his own selfish gain. And, when that didn't work, he resorted to trying to invoke jealousy to break the two apart. Sure, a sick jealousy involving incest. But jealousy all the same. Word spread around even more of Naruto's fantastic present to Gai's kunoichi, and of all the reactions thereof. Even Sakura's reaction to Tenten was whispered about, because most people knew that it was Sakura who Naruto liked. The fact that Sakura seemed to react so badly to Tenten's presence boded ill for both Naruto and Tenten. Tenten had a vague idea about the rumors, but didn't pay them much mind because she was training with her newest, and by far coolest, weapon. Naruto? He didn't have a clue. But the townsfolk, and soon growing numbers of ninjas. They knew, or thought they did. Oh, what tangled webs we weave. The day of the finals arrived. After training with Jiraiya, Naruto felt like he had a darn good chance of beating Neji. It had been a long month, but he felt it was worth it. He hadn't been in the village very much. In fact, he had barely been in Konoha at all. He had spent time around it, sure, but he rarely went into Konoha proper. Man, this is what I'm talking about. Just gimme a hat, and I could totally pull a frog from it. Not quite as impressive as rabbits, sure, but I'll take what I can get. Yeah, Naruto was pleased. Training with Jiraiya, while in some ways a hassle, was totally worth it. There's no way Sakura-chan won't fall in love with me once she sees my mad ninjutsu skills. Naruto's thoughts strayed to Sakura, as they often did. But it didn't last, as he had other things to focus on. I'm going to kick Neji's ass so hard for what he did to Hinata. Then I'm gonna pass the Chunin exam, Datbeo. But, as he wandered through town, he began to notice something was different. That's odd. Everyone seems to be whispering and pointing as I go by. Normally, they just ignore me. Hey, did that woman just smile at me? What the hell's going on? Naruto was very pleasantly surprised. He thought he'd have to become Hokage before everyone decided to acknowledge him. Naruto felt that his whole day had just gotten better. Man, maybe they all know about my awesome ninjutsu skills now, too. Naruto, being Naruto, began to smile back and made his way to the arena, both confused and elated. He had been rather nervous about fighting Neji. But somehow, if everyone seemed so happy to see him, he knew he would win. Then the second abnormal thing of the day happened. Naruto Hik-kun. Naruto stopped and turned around. There, leaning against the side of a building, stood Hyuga Hinata. Wait, she's not leaning, she's clutching onto it for dear life. Hinata, what are you doing here? Are you drunk? Naruto talked as loudly as he usually did, his voice carrying over the surrounding area. He didn't even notice that half of the people around him immediately stopped, and turned to see what was going to happen next in the village's most current drama. Yes, Naruto-kun, you shouldn't drink, Hinata. We're way too young for that. Hinata hung her head, having discovered that she had apparently disappointed Naruto. The other half of the crowd, the one that hadn't initially turned, did so when they heard Naruto shout, "We're too young for that." That one was gonna create some new rumors, for sure. Come on, Hinata, I'm sure your family wouldn't approve of that. Sorry, Naruto-kun, I saw Ten and Tenten? Oh, is she practicing with the sword I gave her? That's good. The murmurs of the crowd grew. Apparently Naruto hadn't known that Tenten had accepted his gift. Even stranger, it seemed as if Naruto was completely unaware of the Hyuga girl's affection. But it's okay, Hinata. I'll beat Neji up, and show him that it isn't all about fate. I gotta go, though. The third exam starts soon. And with that, Naruto ran off, leaving Hinata staring off at him as he ran away, before drunkenly stumbling after him. And the crowd, they went to tell everyone the latest news. It is fate that you will lose this match, Uzumaki. Not only am I a genius and you a dead last, but you went and made it personal when you gave Tenten that sword. Naruto and Neji stood, facing off, in the arena. What does me giving Tenten a sword have to do with anything? What, you jealous or something? I ain't giving no sword to you, that's for sure. The crowd buzzed with whispers after that. Did Naruto just call Neji gay? Was Neji acting out just because he wanted Naruto's interest, and saw Hinata actually as competition instead of potential lover? There was much squealing from fangirls at this thought. Of course not, but since you gave her that sword, she hasn't been around to help me. And because of that, well, you'll pay. Fate has ordained it so. Now I just need to finish it. Luckily, the wish of the fangirls was swiftly killed and replaced back with the rivalry over Tenten's favor. And with that, the first match began. Yeah, I know what it feels like to have a seal like that. So what of it? Everyone sat on the edge of their seats as the match grew more and more interesting. Even without the Kaden, Neji was a highly formidable fighter. Naruto's clones would get destroyed, and he would create more. The fight itself was getting kind of repetitive, but no one cared. No, everyone was listening to the dialogue. The violence was interspersed in with random arguments over fate, and whether Naruto could really understand what Neji's life was like. Most of the crowd found that highly ironic. And then, after Neji utilized the Hake Rokuhuion show, a lot of people were overjoyed. Because apparently, a lot of the women's thoughts were correct. Naruto did exist past the Kyuubi. He existed despite the Kyuubi. He tried his damnedest to succeed, and it looked like he would. By Naruto's own words, he had a difficult life, but one that he existed despite his fate, instead of to live up to it. It scared a lot of people. When Naruto had gotten up after the Hake Rokuhuion show, and seemingly called up the Kyuubi's chakra to reopen his tenketsu. But then he proved his own humanity with one simple line. Neji didn't stand a chance. Winner, Uzumaki Naruto. The rest of the fights continued, with Sasuke not showing up, Kankuro forfeiting, and Shikamaru giving up. But the thing most people dwelled on was Naruto's words to Neji. It seemed as if there was much more going on than any of them had guessed. But most resolved to thank that Tenten girl for whatever she had done to make sure Naruto stayed human. And it would only get worse when word of Naruto and Hinata's encounter before the exams got spread around. Something different happened this time around, after Kabuto utilized his genjutsu. For, you see, after Sakura woke up Naruto, the first thing he saw was the glowing purple box on top of one of the building, with the Sandame fighting within. So, instead of staying around to await Kakashi's orders, he immediately rushed over in that direction, eager to help save his faux grandfather's life. Kakashi, watching him run away, sighed. He turned to one of the other genin present, as he felt he needed someone to replace Naruto on his little team to save Sasuke from his own stupidity. You, guys girl, Tenten, go with Sakura and Shikamaru and Naruto arrived on top of the building, where 4 Anbu sat, pondering the dilemma presented by the barrier. What the hell? Why aren't you helping out? The lead Anbu pointed at the barrier. That keeps us out, kid. Now run along and go help fight. But Naruto didn't give up that easily. No, Naruto stood and pondered the barrier for a minute. Then he ran up to the barrier and smashed a hole in the floor right next to one of the corners. Naruto dropped in the hole, and a moment later, the soundnin maintaining that corner cried out and fell in a hole too. The barrier, no longer being supported by all 4 corners, collapsed. Naruto hopped out from the hole, looked at the stunned Anbu, and said, "Man, you guys really need to think these things through." With that, he turned and ran straight towards Sarutobi, who was currently fighting Orochimaru, and 2 other guys who looked strangely familiar, wielding a huge staff. Well, I might as well even the odds. Naruto knew what he had to do. It was time for him to utilize his super cool ninjutsu. Not even thinking about what could possibly be stupid about doing this, Naruto leapt high up into the air, over the fight. As he came down, directly above Orochimaru, he began working hand seals. As he finished, he called out the name of the technique. Kachiyose no Jutsu, pouring as much chakra as he had into it. Naruto summoned forth Gamabunta, who appeared directly above Orochimaru. It was an odd scene after that. No one could have survived that. The entire building they had been standing on had been crushed by the enormous toad falling. All the fighters, aside from Orochimaru, had managed to jump up and off the collapsing building. Now the Hokage, Naruto, the 4 Anbu, and the Sound 4 just stood there, in front of Gamabunta, who was confused as all hell as to what he was doing here. And there, under one of Gamabunta's feet, was a hand sticking out, holding a sword. Naruto, thinking back to the story that Zabuza had told him. He immediately decided that the sword was his, because he had killed the guy. Not realizing that was only a Kiri tradition. So as the Sound 4, realizing the situation and their own drained chakra from maintaining the shield, surrendered, Naruto walked over and picked up the sword. Hey, now, what am I going to do with you? However, it was at this moment that everyone felt a chilling chakra, and saw an enormous figure rising out of the woods a little ways away. The Hokage, realizing what was going on, pointed to one of the Anbu. Tenzo, go take care of that. Gamabunta finally decided to say something. What the hell am I doing here? And what the hell is Shukaku doing over there? Naruto, seeing the giant sand demon, shouted up to his summon, even as he leapt up his body in an effort to reach his head. Hey, Gamabunta, we're gonna go fight him. He's threatening Konoha. Kid, You're going to owe me so much sake for this. Gamabunta hopped off, in the same direction Tenzo had, towards the giant sand demon. But, out of the two, the only one the villagers saw was Naruto, riding off to battle in a manner so reminiscent of their greatest hero. And even more rumors began to spread. And Sarutobi stood, where he could now see Orochimaru's crushed corpse. I always thought it would be more climactic than that, but I'll take what I can get. WHO will feed mother. WHO will I kill next. The fight had gone pretty poorly over here. Sasuke was drained of his chakra, hiding in a tree. Sakura was there with him, holding him up. Tenten was on the ground, drained of her own chakra, resting on the enormous blade of Kabikuri Hucho. She had been the last foe that had fought Gaara, before he managed to complete his monstrous transformation. It was only the presence of said sword that had let her block any of his attacks at all, its wide blade easily deflecting his sand shuriken, and letting her deflect attacks from larger pieces of sand. But, even then, she was easily outclassed, and was only barely standing. Gaara, enraged, had spent the whole fight flailing around, looking for Sasuke to kill him. But now he had decided that if Sasuke wasn't going to come out, he might as well just go ahead and let mother out to play. That is, until Gamabunta arrived, with Naruto on top. And a random Anbu, too. Tenten had never been so happy to see anyone in her life. It was like watching a crappy kaiju movie, at first. Gamabunta shot a water ball at Shukaku, and Shukaku dodged and fought back with an air blast. Then Gamabunta drew its sword, and stabbed the Shukaku. Right as the Anbu began a seal sequence. From a distance, it looked like somehow Gamabunta had defeated Shukaku. But really, it was the Anbu Tenzo, using the abilities that Orochimaru had spliced into him, to force the demonic chakra down. Not that any of the observers saw that. Gaara fell to the earth, with Naruto jumping down after him. Naruto began to speak with the downed Gaara, who was apparently shocked that he lost. I told you before, you're just like me. I just decided that there are people and things worth fighting for, that the world isn't just about me. As Gaara fell silent, Temari and Kankuro approached. Temari recognized Naruto, a little, from her first encounter with him before the exams, and from him evidently calling her perfect after her match. Sakura and Sasuke also jumped down from their tree, stunned at seeing Naruto ride in on the huge toad. Being Konoha nin, they knew who else had the toad summons. Naruto, still holding the Kusanagi blade, looked around. His eyes first stopped on Temari and Kankuro. Just as Temari opened her mouth to say something, Naruto turned away. Naruto kept on looking, and saw Sasuke and Sakura. Just as he was about to saying something to Sakura though, he saw Tenten resting against Kabukiri Hucho right behind them. His face lit up. Man, does she have good timing or what? Hey, it's Tenten, just the person I wanted to see. Ooh, you even were using Zabuza's sword. That's perfect. See, I just got this new sword, and I was wondering. Both Sakura and Temari looked awestruck for similar reasons. Sakura for having Naruto ignore her for anything, besides ramen that is. Temari for being so easily dismissed by any guy, much less one that seemed to compliment her before. Kankuro was amused by his sister's reaction, more than anything else, before heading over to Gaara's side. Sasuke just stood there, jealously. Even as Naruto apparently fussed over Tenten, Kankuro brought his puppet to bear, ready to fight. Temari, remembering herself, reached for her fan. No, we will not fight. Let's just go. Tenzo stood, forgotten by the children, ready to strike down Gaara as he lay in a moment of weakness. That is, until he received a message from the Hokage via messenger pigeon to let Gaara go. And Tenten? Tenten stood, in even greater bemused wonder, looking at her newest sword. Naruto. This sword. Where did you get this sword? Oh, well, you know that guy Orochimaru? Well, he was attacking the Hokage, and so I killed him. And since I killed him, I took his sword. But, ya know. Naruto left unsaid that he didn't actually know how to use a sword. Tenten thought that he was implying that he wanted to give it to her. I don't know what to say, Naruto. The Kusanagi blade is. Wait, idiot, what the hell are you saying, that you killed Orochimaru? He was an S-rank missing nin. Sasuke couldn't believe that Naruto was trying to claim that he had killed one of the strongest ninjas in the world. Preposterous. Did too, Sasuke. And that's his sword. Like anyone is going to believe that. Tenten arose, holding the sword. Well, one of the things people say about the Kusanagi blade is that it can cut through anything. She walked over to the nearest tree, and placed the edge of the blade against, and slowly moved against the tree. All the genin watched in awe as the tree was cut cleanly through. Tenten's eyes welled up. At first, she hadn't quite believed it either. But now, this guy had given her a second priceless sword? My God, and this is just the way he shows he likes me? What would he give me if he was asking me to marry him? Sakura, knowing of the rumors. Well, she was a little jealous. Not because someone else had Naruto's interest, no. Of course not. We love Sasuke, Shanaru. But because if she had a priceless sword, then she was sure she could attract Sasuke's interest. Then two things happened simultaneously. First, Tenten decided that Naruto deserved a hug. Nothing more than that. Because she didn't want Naruto to think that all he had to do to get into her pants was kill super ninjas and steal their weapons. But it was a nice hug nonetheless. Second, Jiraiya arrived. Well, it looks my student takes after me more than I thought. I was going to take you out drinking for killing Orochimaru and all. But I think this is better. What would I call it? Icha swords? Naruto's confusion over being hugged by Tenten quickly boiled over into anger at Jiraiya. Shut up, Ero Sennin. If you ever write one of your pervert books about me, I'll kill you. Tenten, Sakura, and Sasuke could only stare bewildered as Jiraiya ran off, laughing, with an enraged Naruto in chase. Okay, Naruto, let's call it quits for the night. Out in the woods near Konoha, Naruto and Jiraiya finished a training session. At Naruto's request, Jiraiya continued to teach him cool ninjutsu, mainly as an artifice to keep him under watch, and to ensure that he would be strong enough in case Akatsuki made their move. Of course, it helped that Naruto had finally slain his traitorous teammate 3 days before. So, Jiraiya woke Naruto up each morning, took him out to the woods, and continued to train him. Jiraiya was more than a little impressed by Naruto's dedication to improving himself, though that was balanced out with his constant demanding to be taught cool jutsus. This time, though, Naruto had managed to exhaust himself a little bit earlier than usual. They had been working on a more advanced chakra control exercise, one that would, if mastered, probably let Naruto create half again as many Kage Bunshin than he already could. Come on, Ero Sennin. We still have some more daylight. Teach me something else. You're too tired to learn any ninja skill right now, idiot. You need to rest to regain some chakra. Naruto's desire to learn pushed Jiraiya to his wits' end, to be honest. If it wasn't for a combination of factors, Jiraiya would probably have already left to go peeping. Dealing with Naruto when he wasn't actually teaching him something was very frustrating. Besides, for his latest book, Jiraiya wanted Naruto to spend some time doing something other than training, just so he could observe the kid interact with that Tenten girl. Something that Naruto always looked confused about whenever Jiraiya brought it up. Well, teach me something else. I just need to learn something to make me cooler than Sasuke. He still needs to be cooler than Sasuke. Didn't he take out one of the most dangerous ninja in the world? Geez, what could he possibly be competing with the little Uchiha over? The stupid argument continued a little bit longer, as Jiraiya weighed his options. I can't really teach him how to peep. He'd just ruin it for me and rat me out or something. But what else could I show him that would shut him up? Fine. Let me look through my pack and see if I have anything else to teach you. I wasn't planning on anything like this, so don't get your hopes up. Stalling to give himself time to think, Jiraiya began pawing through some stuff he carried around with him. He didn't carry much around, just useful supplies and a few trinkets from his youth. Hey, the panties of the daughter of the fire daimyo. The mailing address to the wind daimyo's sister. The deck of cards that we used when me and Orochimaru finally convinced Tsunade to play strip poker. That could work. A metaphorical light bulb appeared over Jiraiya's head. Teaching Naruto to gamble would both keep the kid occupied, as well as giving him another opportunity to empty out the boy's wallet. Plus, it might even shut him up for a bit. Jiraiya, having a game plan, turned around to face Naruto. Seeing as you're too tired to work out anything physically, I'll teach ya a more mental game. It'll help you hone your lie detection skills, your own ability to lie. And chicks dig guys who are good at poker. So, I guess that qualifies it as being really cool. I'm gonna teach you how to play poker. Kakashi, I'm telling ya, he's a natural. I've never seen anyone as lucky as him. Hell, last night alone caused me to have to teach him 5 new, kick-ass jutsus, as well as 15 meals at Ichiraku. And you've seen how much he eats. The next day, Jiraiya had sought out Kakashi, to talk with him about Naruto's absurd gambling luck. Jiraiya, after explaining the basic rules of poker, taught Naruto a common version of hold'em poker. And proceeded to get his ass handed to him. Every hand where Jiraiya thought he might have something, Naruto had him beat. Hell, he had never seen anyone actually get a royal flush without cheating before. And Naruto got 2 of them last night alone. Either Naruto was the luckiest kid around, or the best person Jiraiya had ever met at sleight of hand. While that's nice and all, Jiraiya, you aren't really well known for your amazing gambling skills yourself. You're no Tsunade or anything. But you aren't that great. And why are you telling me this all again? Kakashi, though. Kakashi didn't believe it. Kakashi was a fan of card games himself, as many ninjas were. It was a way to test essential ninja skills without actually putting yourself in a life-threatening situation. Also, you could pretty easily supplement your income if you were good enough. And Kakashi was more than good enough. He was among the best of the Junin, only consistently losing to a few of the torture and interrogation people. But nobody beat them, except for Yamanakas. And frankly, it's harder for them not to cheat when it comes to games like poker. Because I want to take him with me to Tanzuki Gai and win me some money, that's why. Not happening, Jiraiya. You know who's after him. You know the risks. I don't think it could possibly be worth it to do this. Jiraiya was not so easily dissuaded, though. He knew this would be a good idea. It would give him nice filler work for his story, for what Naruto did in his off time, as well as gave him a large chance of making money. Just sponsor the boy by paying for his games, and reap the rewards. The plan practically couldn't fail. But the Hokage had told him that he would need Kakashi's permission to take his genin out. So first, he had to convince Kakashi that this was a good idea. Jiraiya, eyes gleaming and mouth smirking, offered unto Kakashi a challenge he could not refuse. How about this, then? You and Naruto play some poker. If he wins, you let me take him out to gamble with. If you win, I'll send you preview copies of the next Icha Icha that comes out. As Jiraiya started his offer, Kakashi frowned. It was practically giving up right there, having a boy who practically wore his heart on his sleeve go up against a man who never showed any of his real emotions in a game based heavily on reading people. Hell, Kakashi knew that Naruto would never have the head for the math required to be good at the game without reading people. This was like sticking a fish in a barrel, and telling Kakashi to shoot it. But then, Jiraiya baited his hook, and Kakashi didn't even think that maybe he was the fish waiting to be caught. Because there was no way he would turn down the chance for free Icha Icha. Deal. The scene was a strange one, at Ichiraku's ramen bar. Sitting at a table that was set out in front of the bar were Kakashi and Naruto. Surrounding the two were Sakura and Sasuke, Jiraiya, and numerous villagers who were enjoying the spectacle. Most in the audience were stunned. Sasuke didn't even pretend to hide it, standing behind Kakashi with his mouth gaping open. He hadn't moved in the past 5 minutes. Sakura, on the other hand, was standing behind Naruto. Hell, she was actually cheering him on. She was happy to see Kakashi finally getting payback for all those times he was late. And, while she wouldn't admit it, she was happy that Naruto was the one making him pay. Naruto's face was glowing with pleasure, as he counted out another stack of chips that just became his. Not only were the villagers cheering him on, not only was Jiraiya praising him, but Sakura was cheering. For him, this was pretty much one of the best days of his life. Well, Kakashi-sensei? Ready to admit defeat? Never. Shit, what can I put up for chips, though? Kakashi was stumped. There was no way this was happening. No effing way. The game was going pretty poorly for Kakashi. Naruto had about 4/5 of the chips, as well as a paper that guaranteed him training until mastery of form and shape manipulation. He wasn't going to lose the match to a genin, much less one with as little emotional control as Naruto. His pride refused it. The next hand was dealt out, and Kakashi put up the ante, which took up most of the rest of his chips. So, if he wanted to win, he needed to bring something else to the table. I refuse to put up my Icha Icha, on the off chance I don't win this all back. But I need this money. I don't get a paycheck until next Tuesday. Shit, what do I have that Naruto might want? There's always dads. How about putting up a day without your mask for one stack of these chips? Kakashi reached a decision. If Guy couldn't get him to take off his mask, no one could. However, you had to be a blind idiot not to see what Naruto was up to lately. He was actually incredibly proud of Naruto, who seemed to finally move on from his old crush to a new one. Even more so, he showed his affection in true ninja fashion, killing absurdly overpowered ninjas, taking their swords, and giving them to his one true love. The fact that Jiraiya had already announced that he was going to turn it into the next volume of Icha Icha didn't have anything to do with it. Nope, none at all. So, that left Kakashi with an option to put on the table something he, frankly, didn't care that much about to begin with. But it was something that Naruto would probably put great stock into. And, seeing his hand against what had just come out on the flop, Kakashi felt it was worth the risk. No, not happening, Naruto. But how about this? Even as Kakashi began speaking, new people arrived at the game. The crowd had been slowly growing the whole time, with new people arriving every hand. Teams 8 and 10 were already there with their Junin, though Kurenai was more than a little put out to be present. She had been working on drying out Hinata, and removing her new addiction from her system, and she just knew that anything involving Naruto would cause Hinata to backslide. However, a new team had arrived on the scene. Team Guy just showed up, because anyone beating his eternal rival merited as something to see to Guy. And they arrived to hear Kakashi say something quite extraordinary. I'll place my father's old chakra blade, repaired and all, on the table, in return for everything else in the game thus far. The crowd immediately hushed. The White Fang's chakra blade? That was one of the signatures of the Konoha of days past. The crowd began whispering about the possibility of Naruto gaining another legendary sword. Jiraiya was silently praying, thanking God above for his students' absurd luck. Icha Icha swords practically wrote itself, damn it. Okay, what you got? Tenten's heart stopped. Everyone in Konoha knew who Kakashi's dad was. He was a legend, equal to that of the Sannin. And one of the most incredible things about him was his white chakra fang, one of the two strongest swords to ever come out of Konoha. Naturally, as she arrived, all the villagers started whispering, and quietly moved out of her way, letting her, and her team, approach the gamblers unobstructed. Tenten didn't pay it much mind, as she was too caught up in the game. But her team, the other teams, and the villagers thought that she was up in the clouds for a different reason. Hey, this game is mine, Naruto. Full house, queens over jacks. Tenten's head dropped. Even if Naruto didn't give the sword to her, she'd have loved to at least see it. The whole of the audience noticeably sighed. It seemed as if Naruto wouldn't have another gift for his beloved. It was a sad day for romantics everywhere. Hee, you better get to reforging it, Kakashi-sensei. Straight flush to the 9 in hearts. The audience immediately picked back up, and there was much applause from the crowd. Naruto looked up, finally noticing all the people there. He had been too intent on the game to really notice just how many people were watching. Planning on looking for Sakura, to show her how cool he was with his mad card playing skills, Naruto instead saw someone else. Directly in the front of him stood Tenten, whose face had gone pale after hearing Naruto gain another legendary sword. Naruto, remembering the fact that he didn't actually know how to use a sword, much less a legendary chakra blade, decided to approach her, and offer her another one. Oh, hi Tenten, did you hear? I just won. Before he could say anything, Tenten swooned, passing out right into Naruto's arms. Somehow completely missing half the crowd, awing or cooing, Naruto turned to Guy, wondering what was wrong with the girl. What's going on? What happened to her? The moment must have just gotten to her, Naruto-kun. Why don't you just take her someplace to rest? Wondering at what the heck Guy was winking so much about, Naruto decided that it was probably a good idea to get her away from all these people, and walked off with Tenten, carrying the girl bridal style. Jiraiya walked over to Kakashi, who was still sitting at the table, head in his hands. Well, it looks like I'll be taking the kid on over to Tanzuki Guy now. You better get on fixing that chakra blade, But, seeing how upset y'all are, I'll still send ya previews of my next chapters, alright? Even as Kakashi bucked up, and Naruto wandered away, Sakura stood in the shadows, growling frustrated to herself. And she completely refused to admit to herself why. Naruto decided to take Tenten out to one of the training grounds that Team 7 used, to give her some fresh air and time to awaken and compose herself. After all, she must be pretty embarrassed, fainting in front of all those people. So he placed her leaning against a tree, and sat on the ground, waiting for her to wake up. 5 minutes later, Tenten awoke. Naruto had ceased to pay attention to her, instead turning to one of the chakra control meditation techniques Jiraiya had taught him the day before. "Hello, Naruto." Tenten, having thought about a moment similar to this for a while now, found herself completely without words. She just didn't know what to say. Luckily, Naruto was both clueless enough not to notice, and talkative enough to fill in the silence. "Oh, hiya Tenten. Awake now, Yeah, Guy-sensei said to take you somewhere else when ya fainted back there. So, is everything better?" Yeah, it is, Naruto." So, Tenten had wanted to know more about her surprising benefactor. It seemed appropriate, what with his odd way of courting her. But now that he was actually there with her, she couldn't think of anything to say. But there was one thing that was bothering her that she wanted to double-check. "Naruto, was that Jiraiya of the Sannin standing behind you before?" "Yeah, he's been training me for the past month or so. He's a good teacher, once y'all get past his massive perversion." "Has he introduced you to the other Sannin, Tsunade?" It was fact that there were more male ninja than female ninja. The disparity grew larger and larger the higher the rank went, from the 2-to-1 ratio of male-female genin, to the 30-to-1 male-female junin. This didn't give little kunoichi that many people to look up to. However, this was assuaged by the existence of Tsunade, a woman who managed to be both a kick-ass fighter and the world's best healer at the same time. Little girls who wanted to be either profession could look up to her with ease. Tenten was no exception, seeing few female role models and having even fewer normal male ones. Tenten had stuck to her desire to be to be better than Tsunade. It wasn't likely, sure, but it gave her a good yardstick to measure her progress against. "Nope, though, I killed the other one, the other day. I haven't met Ero Sennin's third teammate yet." "Why?" "Oh, no reason, I guess." "So, anything you want to talk about?" Naruto was a little confused. There seemed to be more to that statement than there was. But damned if he knew what. Before he could say anything in reply, though, Tenten continued. "You know, I've been wondering. Why me? Why did you choose me? I mean, it's not like we even know each other, you know?" Tenten meant the statement one way. Naruto took it to mean something else. "Well, when I received Zabuza's sword, he told me that a sword should always be used. And, well, Kakashi-sensei told me that it would take too much time to train myself in Kenjutsu, and that I wouldn't be able to also master ninjutsu at the same time. So, I decided to look for someone that used swords, and would be worthy of wielding Zabuza's weapon. And I found you. That's pretty much as unromantic as you can get. But then again, his idea of romance is giving a girl giant-bladed weapons, so maybe it can be forgiven a little." But something in what he said bothered Tenten. "Well, maybe I can help you with learning how to fight with swords." Your teacher was exaggerating a bit. Learning to fight swords doesn't take that long. Mastering it might, but the basics don't. It would give us a chance to get to know each other a bit, and maybe see if this would all work out. Tenten quickly turned away, blushing at seeming so forward. To her, she had pretty much stated her acceptance of Naruto's courting, to see where it could possibly go. If she had kept looking at Naruto, she would have seen his face grow incredibly confused, as he turned her statement over in his head. Not really following most of it, he latched onto the parts of it that made sense. "Sure, that sounds great. I even just got a new sword. You'll teach me how to use Kakashi's dad's chakra blade?" "Yeah, that sounds good." Naruto was elated. The more people who taught him stuff like that, the cooler ninja he would be. If his current rate of learning how to be awesome continued, he'd practically be Hokage in a year or two. "Well, Ero Sennin wants to take me out on a trip to some nearby village or something. But when we get back, you'll be the first person I look up, okay?" The two, finishing their chat, didn't even notice the several observers. The obvious person to be watching was Jiraiya, who was quietly taking notes on their conversation, planning on working it into the dialogue of the book. The rest of Team Guy was nearby, ready to appear and kick Naruto's ass if he said anything to hurt Tenten, or did anything inappropriate. And finally, there was both Hinata and Sakura, there to make sure that Tenten did nothing inappropriate to Naruto. Sakura wasn't sure why she cared so much, But she justified it to herself as she had to watch out for her clueless teammate, and to keep him away from evil women who would steal his heart and then walk away. Maybe someday soon she'd be ready to admit to herself that she wished Sasuke would give her legendary weaponry. But not yet. Hinata? Hinata just hung her head. Kurenai be damned, she needed another drink. Author's notes. Well, someone put up the good idea that a way for Tenten and Naruto to bond is if Tenten taught him how to use a sword. There will be many hilarious rumors abounding, once word gets out that Tenten is teaching him the proper use of his sword. This sets up nicely for the next chapter, which should be fairly obvious in what the basic premise will be. Some other stuff might happen, but that's pretty much it. Sakura is reaching the breaking point of her temper. But what she's so angry about, and how she will react. She has no clue. Hinata? She's just here for the hilariously cute image I have in my head of what a drunken Hinata would look like. I am by no means a fan of any particular girl in the series, and if I was to choose any matchup as my favorite, it wouldn't be Naruto, Hinata. But out of all the girls, she'd have to be the one that ended up being the most adorable drunk. She'll play a larger part down the road though. Maybe Tamari will, too, but I'm not sure how that will go down. Jiraiya cackled gleefully to himself, rubbing his hands together. That bastard Akari has it coming to him. He'll rue the day he tried to cheat me out of my profits. Indeed, Jiraiya had a long and sordid history, with many crimes and immoralities abounding throughout. However, this had nothing to do with any of them. When Jiraiya first wrote Icha Icha, a man named Akari was contracted as his publisher. Unfortunately, Jiraiya didn't read through the contract, and it was only afterward that he found out that Akari was stealing most of the profit. But now Jiraiya had the means to ruin him. Akari's main source of income was his casino, and he now had the means to which to totally bust the house. Without cheating, it was a good day to be Jiraiya. Okay, Naruto, just remember what we talked about. You go in there, and you win as much money as possible. Just go to the highest cash game you can find. And win. Actually, better yet, if you can find a blackjack table, or maybe craps. Ah, come on, Ero Sennin. I just want to train. Cards are fun and all. But I gotta be a kick-ass ninja, too. Jiraiya sighed. Couldn't the brat see how important this was? He'd just to have to show Naruto how much girls liked the high rollers, then. How about this? You walk out of there with more than, say, quadruple the money you walked in, and I'll teach you one of the Yondaime's signature jutsus, okay? Deal. After getting the heads up from Kakashi, Naruto and Jiraiya left on their way to Tanzuki Gai, for Naruto to get some revenge. Not that he knew it, for Jiraiya. Of course, if questioned, Jiraiya had a number of other reasons prepared for why he was doing this. Some of them were even applicable and logical, too. The best one he had was that it was for filler scenes for Icha Icha swords. He would make up a premise, like, say, one of these other gamblers had kidnapped Tenten, or something, and that Naruto was winning her back. However, writing was easiest done when there was also visual information on what to write, so getting Naruto here and letting him gamble was the easiest way to get the stuff down. It made a little sense, and most would probably just accept it as being one of Jiraiya's eccentricities. In fact, it was even true, to an extent. There was a reason that Jiraiya did all of his best writing while peeping, after all. There were also some other, more minor reasons, like showing Naruto there was something he was really good at, which would give him something about himself to take pride in. Maybe give him a way to make a living if something should ever happen to his ninja career, or something. However, as Jiraiya followed Naruto in, he immediately noticed something that pretty much proved to him that Naruto was essentially the avatar of the luck god. For there, sitting at a table gleefully dealing out cards, was his old teammate, Tsunade. Itachi. I have a bad feeling about this. As do I, Kisame. He is with Jiraiya of the Sannin, a foe neither of us could hope to defeat. However, Pain-sama has made it clear that we have to capture the Nine Tails now. For whatever reason, our schedule has been rushed. Outside the casino, two evildoers plotted. Dastardly plans were formed, then quickly broken down and discarded, all in an effort to figure out a way to separate the vessel from his teacher. What they come up with, while not the best of plans, was the best option they could see. Naruto. Change of plans. That table. Go to that table, now. BWA what? You said to find the table with the most visible money. That table is decent, sure. But it ain't the most. Naruto. That woman over there is my old teammate, Tsunade. Ya know, the one that your little girlfriend with the swords looks up to? Just go and play at that table, alright? Naruto, quietly protesting Tenten being his girlfriend, made his way over to Tsunade's table, and sat down in an open seat directly across from the woman. Well, aren't you a bit young to be playing here, kid? Why don't you go outside and play with some other children, and leave the adults to their own entertainment? Naruto was going to be nice to the woman. She was, after all, his teacher's old teammate, and apparently the idol of young women everywhere. But then she went and insulted him. Why don't you go outside and knit something, old woman? Maybe go bake some cookies or something? Because old hags certainly shouldn't be hanging out with people this much younger than them. Why you little brat? Just as Tsunade looked like she was about to reach across, or maybe break through, the table and strangle Naruto. Jiraiya appeared. Damn it, Naruto. I told you to place nice with her, not antagonize her. You never said that, Ero Sennin. You just told me to take all her money. Tsunade sat back in her seat, eye twitching. Somehow, I'm not surprised to see you training another little brat, Jiraiya. Would it kill you to ever teach any of them manners? Yeah, well, you know me, Tsunade. My students may all be brats, but they tend to be the best ninjas of their time. Jiraiya was playing it up a little, because he wanted to see Tsunade's expression when she found out what happened to Orochimaru. No one would ever expect him to have died by toad squishing. As Naruto started to puff up in pride at that, Tsunade swiftly burst his bubble. Well, I can see that maybe Minato was worth that title. But what the hell has this brat done to deserve a title like that? Now, it should be known that Tanzuki Guy wasn't that far away from Konoha. Word spreads easily, too, especially about important things. No one actually recognized Naruto here. But many of them had heard the stories of the genin who slew legendary ninja to show his love for his woman. So when Jiraiya replied to Tsunade, many began to listen. Well, Naruto here has done some extraordinary things lately. A couple months ago, he slew Momochi Zabuza, one of the former 7 mist swordsmen, and took his sword. And, just over a week ago, he saved Sarutobi Sensei's life. And killed Orochimaru. Silence filled that area of the casino. Tsunade looked sharply at Jiraiya, and then turned her gaze to Naruto. After a moment or two of Naruto looking back at her proudly, she laughed. Do you honestly expect me to believe that this brat killed Orochimaru? I don't think you could kill him. So why believe this kid could? Naruto bristled. I did. Are you calling me a liar, hag? I dropped Gamabunta on him, and… Yeah, kid. Save it for someone who'll believe ya. Now, back to the game. How the hell did that happen? You see, during the whole time they were talking, the card game had continued. And Naruto had continued to play, even while not even paying attention. Tsunade was shocked. No, stunned. To see that Naruto had somehow amassed 9/10 of the chips on the table in that short time frame. Tsunade gaped. Jiraiya started chuckling, breaking Tsunade out of her reverie. Yes, this is more than enough. Now ya have to teach me one of the Yondaime's jutsus, Ero Sennin. Sure, Naruto. Yeah, Tsunade, that's one of the other reasons why we're here. Naruto is pretty much the luckiest person I've ever seen at cards. Why, just the other day he won a 3rd legendary sword off of the copy ninja, Hitaki Kakashi, in a game of cards. That old chakra blade of Konoha's White Fang. Impressive, no? Tsunade was sick of hearing Jiraiya praise the kid. She didn't believe a little genin could kill Orochimaru. And she didn't believe the kid could be that good at cards. No way. He had to have cheated. You're pretty good at that, though. I didn't even notice ya doing it. So I guess you are good at something, it seems. Though I don't know if cheating at cards is a skill to be proud of. Naruto leapt to his feet, anger forming a visible aura around him. No one accused him of being a cheater. That was, well, cheating. And cheating was wrong. I'm not cheater. Maybe if you didn't suck so much, I wouldn't win so easily. Tsunade also stood up. By this time, everyone else playing at the table had quickly backed away, but they and many more had turned to watch the escalating fight. Are you still insulting me, kid? I've killed people for less. Don't make me kick your ass. Ha, bring it. I could beat you any day of the week. Is that a challenge? Hells yeah it is. Outside, now. With that, Naruto ran outside, leaving Jiraiya, who was swiftly collecting Naruto's winnings, and Tsunade within. I hope you don't blame me if your kid dies, Jiraiya. He started this. To Tsunade's surprise, Jiraiya started to laugh again. Oh, I think you're in for one heck of a surprise, Tsunade. After all, have you ever known me to make jokes when it comes to Orochimaru? Jiraiya turned and left, leaving a contemplative Tsunade to follow after him. What the hell is going on out here? This was most definitely not what Jiraiya was expecting to see when he arrived outside. For, it seemed that there were people waiting for them. And not the good kind of people. Out in front of the casino was Naruto confronting two people Jiraiya hoped not to see on the trip. Well, not these two in particular. But any team from Akatsuki counted as bad news. Especially when they're Hoshigaki Kisame and Uchiha Itachi. No, you idiot. You don't use the food cart destroyer in the middle of a crowded city. You might kill civilians. And especially when Naruto's idea of fighting involved dropping toads on people. Indeed, Itachi and Kisame had been hoping to get Naruto when Jiraiya wasn't around. It was pretty much the best thing that could have happened, really. Without Jiraiya around, there should have been no problem disabling the Jinchuriki and making good their escape. But, to Itachi's surprise, after Naruto dropped the huge toad on them, or tried to, Kisame seemed to freeze up. He looked scared, terrified, even. Itachi turned and saw Jiraiya and Tsunade exiting the building. Kisame, control yourself. Even though Jiraiya and, apparently, Tsunade of the Sannin have arrived, doesn't mean you should. Not Tsunade. It's that kid. He's the sword thief. Itachi's brow rose. He hadn't heard any such thing about their target before. Sword thief? Do explain. Itachi thought it might help them stall for time, seeing as all of their opponents stopped preparing to fight, to listen to Kisami's explanation. Or, more accurately, Tsunade had stopped to listen, while Jiraiya had pulled out a pen and paper, and was scribbling stuff down. You were there when we heard about this guy the other day. Ya no, he's the one who killed both Momochi Zabuza and Orochimaru, just to give their swords to show his love to some girl. I'm not going to let him add Samahata to that list. With that, Kisame shunshined away. Itachi, standing alone for a moment, swiftly followed after. Naruto turned to Jiraiya. Did I just scare away the giant fish man? Jiraiya nodded sagely. That was Hoshigaki Kisame, Naruto. An S-ranked missing nin, former member of the Seven Swordsmen of the Mist, and possessor of one of the most powerful swords ever forged in Kiri, Samahata. Naruto's face lit up. I scared away an S-ranked missing nin? I'm totally awesome. Tsunade was confused. Apparently the brat hadn't been lying. Jiraiya, either. And, watching the kid gleefully dance about, he was pretty much the perfect archetype of the student that Jiraiya always seemed to train. It also seemed that Naruto took to summoning toads fairly well. Though it wasn't nearly as large as the one Jiraiya used for the food cart destroyer, the toad Naruto managed for that wasn't too shabby. Plus, the one the size Jiraiya usually used would have probably crushed a quarter of the town. She turned towards Jiraiya, though. Because there was something else bothering her about this situation. Jiraiya, why the hell are there two S-ranked missing nins looking for this kid? Jiraiya sighed, and motioned Tsunade closer to him. Because he's the vessel. Their organization wants to do something that involves having all of the Biju. And then it all made sense to Tsunade. She turned towards Naruto and spoke. I knew you were cheating. You must be using some of its power to be that good at cards. Much less kill someone like Orochimaru. Naruto stopped his cavorting, and glared back at Tsunade. You take that back. I never use the fox's strength, not when I can help it. I do it all on my own, and one day, because of that, I'll be Hokage. Believe it, old hag. Tsunade's eyes widened as Naruto announced his plans for the future. Just for a moment there, he had looked so much like Nawaki. She turned her head and snorted. Who the hell would want that shit job? Being Hokage sucks, and those would want to be it are even stupider. Again, she could practically feel Naruto's chakra get agitated at that, and it looked like at any moment he would lose control and attack her. You take that back. Being Hokage is my dream. Protecting everyone, making everyone my precious people. That has to be the most important job there could be. Even if they don't like me, or they don't appreciate me. It won't matter. I'll still be Hokage. It all sounded so familiar to Tsunade. She had heard it before, from her own precious people. But she was a lot more jaded now, a completely different person. Or so she liked to think. Now she laughed. Ha, bring it, punk. Being Hokage just isn't worth it. Naruto rushed towards her. With that, the battle was on. Kisame, you cannot flee from our target like a scared child. We need to capture him, and we need to capture him now. People from Konoha might already be on their way, sending word of our passage through the village. I know, Itachi. It's just that, well, I can't risk Samahata. You know why. Itachi stared at Kisame for a moment before responding. We will have to alter the plan, taking Tsunade into account. But, regardless of her presence, we must try again to kidnap the vessel. If we fail, then there is nothing that could be done, and we shall return to headquarters. But best we not run that risk. And it wasn't surprising in the least that Naruto was getting tossed around like a rag doll. About 5 minutes into the fight, though, something changed. One of Tsunade's punches opened up a gash on the side of Naruto's face, parallel to his whisker marks. And it started to bleed. Naruto was shocked when Tsunade froze up, letting one of his own punches through. Jiraiya rushed into the fray, concerned at the course this was taking. He had figured by now that Tsunade would have gotten over her hemophobia. However, the second Jiraiya had let himself be distracted. A blast of fire headed straight towards him. It seemed as if Itachi and Kisame had returned. Right in Tsunade's moment of weakness. Kisame, now is our chance. Tsunade seems incapacitated. Alright, I just don't want to let that kid anywhere near Samahata. Who knows what he would try to do. Fine, when we attack, the vessel is more likely to attempt to aid Jiraiya. So I will engage Jiraiya, holding him off while you handle Tsunade. She seems to be stunned, for whatever reason, so if you are fast, it can be over quickly. Then, attack Jiraiya, and I will use the moment of surprise to capture the vessel, and we make our escape. Sounds good to me. Then we attack. Now, Jiraiya swiftly dodged to the side of the fireball, returning the shot with a blast of toad oil. Naruto pulled back a little, unsure of where he should go. And then he saw Tsunade, still on her knees, frozen from the sight of his blood. And he saw the giant blue man who thought he was going to steal his sword rush her, blade swung back to strike. And he knew what he had to do. This will be easier than I thought. Just as Kisame brought his sword down, Naruto appeared, tackling the blade itself from the side, knocking it off course. However, there was no way Naruto could expect the properties of Samahata. The way that it shaved, more than it cut. The result wasn't pretty. To Tsunade, it looked awfully lethal. Naruto had caught the blade, and continued to hold onto it, causing more and more friction between it and him, which meant more and more damage was being caused every second. But, that didn't seem to slow Naruto down. He remained standing, stopping the blade from reaching Tsunade. Tsunade found herself looking up at Naruto's back. Blood was gushing freely from his arms, even as Kisame pulled his sword back. To Tsunade's growing horror, Kisame started trying to dislodge the boy from his sword. The frantically terrified expression on Kisame's face stood in stark contrast to his actions. He waved the sword around, slamming it as hard as he could into the ground, trying to get Naruto off his sword. Tsunade stood frozen in horror, watching the terrible scene play out. Kisame was just as concerned as Tsunade. For entirely different reasons. You little bastard, you're not taking Samahata away from me. I won't let you. Naruto had managed to latch onto Samahata like a barnacle, for whatever reason. Finally, though, Kisame managed to dislodge him. And Naruto's body landed at Tsunade's feet. Naruto turned his head a little, looking straight up into Tsunade's face, and mumbled something that Tsunade could barely hear. I toldja, gotta protect everyone. It's what the Hokage does. Even now, he keeps to his dream? There's no way he'll survive. It'll be just like them. Tsunade felt as if her body was running on autopilot, almost. It was surreal. It was as if she was watching from a neutral vantage, seeing her body stand up on its own, with chakra beginning to glow around her hands, before it winked out. Even as Kisame managed to recompose himself after getting his sword back away from Naruto. A punch came out of nowhere, hitting him directly in the stomach. And knocking him back a good 30 feet, directly into a tree. Kisame, severely winded, looked up to see Tsunade standing over him, head down, but clearly enraged. And he did what any smart man would do. He fled. Itachi, seeing that they had missed their opportunity, took his leave as well. Jiraiya immediately ran over to Naruto, who had fallen to his knees, upper body covered in blood. Shit, we need to get those healed up, pronto. He looked over to Tsunade, who was still standing before the tree that Kisame had smashed into. He sighed. It must have been a one-time deal for her, getting past her hemophobia like that. But, to his surprise, Tsunade turned and walked back, calm as you could be. And Jiraiya was shocked even further when she knelt down next to Naruto, and began passing her hands over his arms, knitting flesh back together over the bones. Hey, I told ya, hag, that I'm gonna be Hokage and protect everyone. Jiraiya put his face in his palm. Not even after getting his arms ripped apart can he be unconscious like a normal person. No, he just has to go and antagonize the person healing him. But, to Jiraiya's surprise, Tsunade merely laughed. Sure, I believe you. Surprisingly for Tsunade, and not so surprisingly for Jiraiya, who had witnessed his healing before, Naruto was ready to go after a single night of bed rest. However, Tsunade stunned both of them with an announcement. I've decided that I'm going to go back with you too, see how Konoha's doing. What the hell? I thought you said you'd never go back, years ago. Tsunade turned, and smiled slyly at Jiraiya, and patted Naruto on the head. Yeah, well, I want to see if this one really can become Hokage. Besides, I think you're onto something. I think that if he was my apprentice, then I could do a better job of training him to become Hokage. Jiraiya's eyes twitched, even as Naruto cheered at having a new supporter, teacher. You're just saying that because you want to use him to gamble for you. Well, maybe? But, inside, Jiraiya was cackling. He was right. Icha swords did right itself. Even when he wasn't trying, Naruto managed to do the exact correct thing to make the plot better. The one thing was bothering Jiraiya. Tsunade, don't you have an apprentice already, or something? That Shizune girl? Where is she, anyway? Shizune disapproves of my gambling, so, every so often I ditch her in some random city and go off to gamble. Don't worry, she'll find me eventually. And thus, Naruto made his way back to Konoha. -3 days later. Well, this isn't good. Tanzuki-gai is the last place I could think of that Tsunade-sensei could be. She's not here. Where on earth could she have gone? Shizune stood out in front of one of the major casinos in Tanzuki-gai, stumped. Well, if she's not here, I guess that means she left the country? That's not like something she'd do. But it'd be more likely than her going to Konoha, right? At the same time that Shizune began her northward trek out of Fire Country, Naruto arrived back in Konoha, Tsunade and Jiraiya in tow. Immediately word spread throughout town that he was back, and the rumors grew even more fevered when people saw Tsunade walking with him. What does it mean? Why would Tsunade come back with him? What could possibly be going on? The villagers discussed this, and more, from the second Naruto arrived. Rumors grew even stranger, from Naruto bringing Tsunade back as some sort of gift to Tenten, to Naruto claiming her as a legendary weapon. None of them made much sense, sure. But they were amusing. With such rumors abuzz, Naruto wandered about town, looking for anyone that he knew. Well, he was mainly looking for Sakura-chan or Sasuke, to let them know that he's so awesome that even S-ranked missing nins were afraid to fight him. Of course, this presented a problem. Because Sakura was looking for him. This meant that both were checking different places. After all, Naruto would never expect to find Sakura at Ichiraku's. However, Sakura had camped out there the second she heard that Naruto was back, expecting it to be the first place he went to. So, the first person Naruto ran into was Tenten, who was being aided in her search by pretty much every civilian. Naruto spotted Tenten walking down the street, and figured that he should go up and say hello, and let her know he was ready for the sword lessons. Hiya, Tenten. Tenten spun around, smiling, and greeted Naruto back. Hello, Naruto. So, how was your trip? It was awesome. I found out that I can scare away S-rank missing nins, just by looking at their swords. Tenten's sweat dropped at that, but her curiosity overcame her, prompting her to question that further. S-ranked missing nin? You ran into S-ranked missing nins on your trip? And one of them was afraid of you? Do you know who they were? Tenten and Naruto found themselves walking as they talked, not really paying attention to where they were going. It was pure chance that found them walking by the cafe where Uchiha Sasuke was eating lunch, surrounded by adoring fangirls. who of course kept a mandatory 10-meter distance from him at all times, lest Sasuke get irritated at them for their blatant stalking. Yeah, Jiraiya said they were Hoshigaki Kisame and Uchiha Itachi. Hey, would that make the other guy Sasuke's brother? Man, I wonder why he ran away, too. It's not like he had a sword on him. Neither noticed Sasuke, only hearing that last statement, choke on his sandwich. Nor did they see several fangirls converge on his body, ready to perform the Heimlich and mouth-to-mouth. That's pretty cool. I think I even recognize that first guy's name. Yeah, he had this really huge sword that was covered in this rough stuff that shaved skin off. But I couldn't get a good look at it, because he ran the second he could. So, anyway. When did y'all want to do some training? As the conversation moved onwards, more and more rumors were created, though none as momentous as that last one. The one that caused Sasuke to choke. Word would soon spread throughout Konoha, and then throughout Fire Country, of the genin whose mere presence terrified S-rank missing nins. And as the two walked through town, Naruto remembered something that Tenten had asked the other day. So, remember the other day, when you were asking me if I had ever met Tsunade, the third Sannin? Well, funny story, that Naruto had finally managed to lower his voice a bit, so many of the onlookers couldn't hear what he was saying. But all of them saw Tenten's response. After all, it's not every day you see a flying glomp executed with such precision. Kakashi was well known for many things. His love of Icha Icha, his rivalry with Guy, his skill in battle, his Sharingan. There were many things that people knew about him. The only thing that people knew about him that no one really spoke of was his father, and the shame that drove the man to suicide. To many, it was a surprise that Kakashi would even willingly bring the man up, to bet his sword away in some silly poker game with one of his students. A lesser-known fact about him, that of his usually incredible skill at poker, was currently the topic of whispers amongst the rumor-mongers and gossipers. Someone heard from a friend of a friend that Kakashi had let Naruto win the poker game. To pass on the tradition of the sword? To show his approval of his student courting guys? No one knew, but theories were getting weirder and weirder. The latest was that Kakashi and Guy had gotten drunk, and decided to unite the teams, and that this was Kakashi's way of engaging Naruto to Tenten, and Kakashi was doing nothing to quell them. Indeed, the man found them hilarious. Thus we are presented with a rather unique situation, where Kakashi, pathologically late in everything that he did, stunned most of Konoha by presenting the newly repaired chakra blade to Naruto a mere 30 minutes after Naruto arrived back in Konoha. Of course, none would be surprised that only one word was running through his mind at the time, repeated over and over even as he blushed and giggled perversely. Icha 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 Icha. Hey, the man knows what he likes. Don't knock the books till y'all read him. So the scene was set, in the middle of the town, civilians and ninjas alike watching the village's soap opera continue. Because Kakashi had the incredibly poor timing to arrive mere moments after Tenten glomped onto Naruto. Jiraiya was trailing behind Kakashi, and Tsunade was following Jiraiya, both trying to watch the scene. Jiraiya with pen out and scribbling, Tsunade just confused about what the heck was going on. She had thought Jiraiya had been exaggerating the situation a bit, as he was wont to do from time to time. But then she walks in on a good crowd of people surreptitiously watching some girl with her hair up in buns hug her new pseudo-student, Gambler. Perhaps it was lucky for Naruto that Tenten didn't actually notice Tsunade yet. Who knows what the girl would do? There were more and more people arriving, most wanting to know if Naruto had done the impossible yet again and had managed to bring another sword home for Tenten. Yeah, Hinata stood quietly in a shady corner, blushing and poking her fingers together, mind traveling from one lewd thought to another in her slightly inebriated mental state. Kurenai hadn't been quite as successful as she could have hoped, it seemed. Watching Naruto's face cycle from shocked to confused to embarrassed, Hinata felt something in her mind click. She needed to do something, before all hope was lost. And an idea struck her with such force, that she decided to take a celebratory sip of sake for the sheer genius it possessed. Now, to find Neji. So, now that I have the sword, do you want to start the lessons? Naruto wasn't quite sure what was going on. All he did was mention that he brought that Tsunade woman back to the village with him, and then wham! He was on the ground with Tenten on top of him. He remembered seeing situations similar to this before, where girls would try to hug Sasuke. But Sasuke would always somehow dodge them. Damn it, Sasuke. I guess I have to train harder if I can't even dodge this sort of thing. Poor Naruto. Not even realizing that dodging an attractive girl trying to hug you was not the correct course of action in this situation. Tenten was similarly embarrassed, not quite sure what had come over her. It seemed as if Naruto was going out of his way to make every possible desire she might ever have had to be true. Now she would actually have the chance to measure herself against Tsunade. If the woman came back with Naruto, she might even be able to talk to her. This was great. But then, Naruto mentioned training, and Tenten pulled herself together. Yeah, sure, that sounds good. How about we go over to the training ground? Tenten stood up, and pulled Naruto to his feet, and the two wandered off in the direction of the nearest training ground. The smiles and gossip of the villagers went unnoticed by Naruto, and went ignored by Tenten. Both had more important things on their mind. For Tenten, her mind had turned all business. Seeing the white fang for the first time, she tried to decide what style it would be best suited for, and, with what she knew of Naruto, what style he would be best suited for. Naruto's mind. Well, it was less focused. I thought we already decided that we would use ninjutsu, Naruto? Bah, we have another kick-ass sword. Now we can impress Sakura-chan with that. Naruto was thinking long-term, something people would normally not expect of him. Then again, those who knew him wouldn't be all that surprised by his current mental path. Stronger ninjas are cooler ninjas, and I have to be the best and coolest ninja if I want to be Hokage and get Sakura-chan. And I want to get there as fast as possible. And I have Tenten here willing to teach me how to use a sword. But would that be better than spending time with Ero Sennin learning more ninjutsu? So again, two chibi Narutos appeared over each of his shoulders, one armed with the white fang, the other with a toad on his head. And again, they were having a loud screaming fight on what Naruto should do. If people actually knew this was how Naruto's mind resolved his more complex problems, most would cease to be surprised at his personality. But something different happened this time. The two chibi Naruto continued to fight, and Naruto continued to think and debate, when a stray thought passed through his mind. Training with Ero Sennin is always such a pain in the ass, though. I wonder if spending time with Tenten would be better? As Naruto thought that, the fight wasn't going well for the sword Naruto. After all, ninjutsu Naruto had received some rather focused training of late, so naturally he was the stronger of the two at the moment. But as Naruto began to think about the pros and cons of his two teachers, something happened. Out of nowhere, a third Naruto appeared and blindsided the ninjutsu Naruto. The third was smaller than the first two, and certainly looked weaker than them. Pale, drawn, and weary, with only one thing to really distinguish him from the other two. Where the hell is that idiot? I've been waiting here for an hour. Why hasn't he come here for ramen yet? Sakura was pissed. More than pissed. The idiot boy was wasting her precious time. She was wasting quality Sasuke time on Naruto, and did he even try to appreciate it? Hell no. He didn't even show up for it. Oh, he's gonna pay for this. Sakura just sat, glaring, refusing to contemplate the idea of giving up. Somewhere along the line, this had become a matter of pride. Pride in what, she didn't know. But she knew she needed to talk with Naruto about something. Yeah, talk with him. He was her teammate, right? So she should spend time with him, not that stupid kunai-throwing floozy. Sakura shook her head. Where the hell had that thought come from? She had been having thoughts like this a lot more lately, and it was really bothering her. Sure, sometimes she was mean to the boy, but she did like Naruto. He was a friend that Sakura knew she could count on, and knew that he was stronger than everyone thought he was. That was really the crux of the dilemma. She was so used to having Naruto around, even if it was just him trying to go out with her, that his frequent absences of late just seemed weird to her. Now that it was missing, she realized how much his constant attempts at trying to win her favor meant to her. Her only other real friend was Ino, and maybe Sasuke, depending on how moody he was on any given day. I'm lonely. And she knew why she was lonely. She didn't begrudge Naruto his training with Jiraiya. How could she? That was an enormous opportunity for the guy. But he was in the village now. He should be doing team stuff, like missions and training and such. Not training with that girl. Sakura began to growl a little at the thought, and then realized what she was doing. Why does this piss me off so much? And thus Sakura's thoughts were brought full circle, not really getting her anywhere. because she refused to admit to herself the real answer, that she was afraid that maybe she would lose her friend, and maybe more, because of this other girl. Well, someone's eager for this mission. Getting all dressed up for something? Or maybe, someone? Shut up, Konkaru. Unlike you, I actually look good. Who cares if I want to make sure I look my best? So it has nothing to do with that blonde brat who ignored you, Wind was in a rather shabby position at the moment. Their cage was dead, a large part of their military killed. They owed Konoha a lot for not exterminating them, that was for sure. So, it was decreed that a few teams would be dispatched to help out Konoha. In another time, in another place, this would involve a running battle that ended at the Valley of the End. Now, Team Baki was being dispatched to Konoha, to be used as needed for the new few months. Tamari turned up her nose. Oh, him? I had forgotten all about him. But now that you mention it, well, he should obviously be shown what he's missing out on, shouldn't he? Before Konkaru could reply, Gaara appeared. It's time to go. And the siblings picked up their packs, silently following the youngest, out on a trek to their temporary home. Konkaru snickered to himself. He had seen his sister like this before. Whenever anything insulted her pride, she got all worked up and retaliated. Usually it had to do with someone insulting her skills as a ninja, or the fact she was a kunoichi, or something stupid like that. This was the first time it had ever happened over a boy, though. He couldn't wait to see where this was going. He just knew he was going to get good blackmail material out of this somewhere. But then Gaara turned around to glare at him, and Konkaru gulped, and promptly concentrated on the traveling at hand. Gaara turned back around, and smirked to himself. That in itself would be a surprise to most, as Gaara usually didn't ever really smirk, much less grin or smile, or any other sign of possible enjoyment of a situation, outside killing people, of course. Gaara had been thinking about what the Uzumaki kid had told him, just before the boy had managed to somehow defeat him. Gaara didn't really know what had caused him to lose, as he never even saw Tenzo during the fight, concentrating on the obvious opponent at hand. After all, who would normally be considered the bigger threat, a human, or an enormous sword-wielding toad? The boy said that they were similar. Gaara figured out what that meant, after some deep thought. The guy was admitting to being a Jinchuriki as well. And so Gaara began to research into whom exactly Uzumaki Naruto was. And he was shocked about what he learned. There was a surprising abundance of information circulating about the boy of late. Gaara no longer felt ashamed to have lost to a guy who had apparently also defeated Orochimaru himself, along with some other A-rank missing nin. He heard about the apparent romance that was going on between Naruto and that girl his sister beat up, too. Gaara wasn't one for romance, having no real experience with the subject. He just took a mental note that if he ever did decide to procreate, he should give his chosen woman some kind of trophy from a fallen enemy, or something. Gaara shook his head at that. Even with his own limited experience, that didn't make sense. But apparently it was what he was supposed to do. Strange. Gaara thought on the topic of possible trophies he might have already gathered, if he had known he was supposed to, and then brought his mind back to the matter at hand. He had decided that he would be a better brother to his siblings, as apparently caring about your family made you a better person, and let you fight off your biju easier, or something like that. It was what Uzumaki had told him at the end of the fight, and Gaara believed it. After hearing the tail end of their conversation, Gaara decided that he would start his new life outlook by helping his sister win over Uzumaki. That's what good brothers did, right? 3 hours later, and with the sun setting, Sakura finally called it quits. She had already had ramen for lunch, and a ramen snack. She didn't want to have ramen for dinner, too. The dinner rush hadn't quite started yet, though, when 3 new people arrived at the temporarily deserted ramen stand. And proceeded to outrage Tucci with an absurd demand. You want me to do what? You need to move your stand. Tucci stood, bemused. And why exactly should I do that? Hyuga-sama. Tucci had seen a lot in his days as a ramen chef in a ninja village. He'd seen people be set on fire, seen people run for miles on their hands, hell, he'd even seen a man eat his own head once. Though Tucci hadn't known that one was a genjutsu, it still made for a strange sight. He had even been blackmailed and threatened a time or two before. But never by children. Well, none of them actually looked threatening. The speaker, who Tucci recognized as Hyuga Hinata, certainly was trying, and failing miserably, at looking threatening. The girl couldn't project a threatening image to save her life. And the sake bottle she was clutching to her chest certainly didn't help her threatening image in the least. One of her escorts Tucci placed as Hyuga Neji, who looked more bored than anything else. He certainly didn't seem to want to be there, that was for sure. Tucci wasn't quite sure who the youngest girl was, but she looked enough like the other two that Tucci just figured she was one of their sisters. The girl, who couldn't be older than 7 or 8, was actually doing a more credible job of looking threatening than Hinata was. The fact that she was a cute little girl playing thug made him want to crack up at how adorable the whole thing was. Well, bad things will happen if you don't. Hinata trailed off and turned to look at Neji. Apparently, this was some kind of signal for Neji to do something, but the boy was doing his level best to just ignore the whole situation and wish it ended. Then the littlest girl kicked Neji in the shins. Tucci nearly broke down laughing at that, as Neji turned to glare at her, and got into a staring contest with a girl child half his age and height. But then he sighed, and apparently decided to play his part. If you do not meet Hinata-sama's demands, I will be forced to destroy your stand. Neji spoke in a monotone, as if reading a script. He wasn't even pretending that he wanted to be here, or that he wanted to be doing this, but was apparently strong-armed into helping. After speaking his piece, Neji stiffly walked over to one of the stools and pushed it over. This was followed by the enthusiastic little girl then kicking the fallen stool. Apparently, she liked kicking things. Tucci sighed. This is the worst blackmail attempt I've ever seen. So, what exactly do you want me to do? Tucci decided to humor the children, who were apparently playing some kind of game or something. I want you to move your stand onto the Hyuga grounds. At that, the stand went silent. You want me to what? Hinata could see it in her head. If Ichiraku's, arguably Naruto's favorite place in the world, were to move to her house, then Naruto would obviously have to visit her a lot. And then her house would become Naruto's favorite place in the world. And then she could hug Naruto, and he would hug her back, and kiss her, and take off his pants. Tucci just continued to stare at the blushing girl, whose blush continued to grow worse and worse by the second. Neji, wishing that he had never bothered reconciling with Hinata and that the girl was still weary of approaching him, spoke up. Hinata requested it of Hiyashi-sama, and he has agreed. The Hyuga land is right next to the more expensive areas of the marketplace, making it a better location for a restaurant. It would be foolish of you not to accept. Neji handed a deed over to Tucci, proving his words to be true. Why on earth did Hiyashi agree to such a ridiculous idea as having a ramen stand on Hyuga property, you ask? So, if I let this ramen stand that you like be put on our grounds, you'll place you and your team on permanent guard of my private sake stores and stop that dastardly sake thief whenever you aren't on a mission, Hinata? Hiyashi was going to regret that agreement, for sure. Tucci weighed the issue in his mind for a minute or two. But really, there was really only one answer to this he could give. I would be honored to move my stand onto the new property, Hyuga-sama. Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Sarutobi sat within the Hokage office, chatting about old times and such. They were interrupted by the arrival of a messenger from Wind, giving to Sarutobi the details of the teams being sent to aid Konoha. Right at the top of the list was the name of the Tsunade Jinchuriki. Sarutobi sighed. He just knew that would cause him a migraine. There was no way he was going to let the unstable Jinchuriki wander Konoha. But then again, he knew Akatsuki was active. He had just been given Jiraiya's report on what had occurred in Tanzuki-gai. He knew that he couldn't let them get Gaara either. What to do? Sarutobi reviewed the facts of the situation. Akatsuki was out there. They were after the Biju, thus they were after Jinchuriki. If they captured Jinchuriki, bad things happened. Thus, he had to keep Gaara safe. But due to the whole attack and all, no one would really want Gaara in the village. So Sarutobi had to keep Gaara safe, while keeping him out of the village. The obvious answer would be to put him in the care of one of his more competent ninjas, and frankly, the only people in the village who would be able to really stop an Akatsuki member were sitting in his office. So he would just have to send them on a mission out of town, and send Jiraiya or Tsunade along with them. Weighing it in his mind a bit, and with what he knew of both of his remaining former students, he decided that Jiraiya was the safer choice. Or rather, Sarutobi felt like Jiraiya was the one that he could actually convince to do it. especially as he happened upon the perfect mission to convince Jiraiya to take up this order. Sarutobi's smile grew. Jiraiya, I have a mission for you. You are to take Naruto, along with one of the teams from Sand, and hunt down a man named Rokusho Aoi. 4 hours later, when Naruto finally arrived at Ichiraku's, a scream of anguish could be heard all throughout the village. Within a shadowy cave, evil doers plotted. I refuse to go after the Kyuubi again. He's got it in for me. He nearly managed to get my sword. Well, some were plotting. 1 or 2 were whining. Kisame, we get the point. You're afraid of some child, yeah. Someone else can handle the Kyuubi while you go and cry in your room. The Akatsuki were famous in the upper echelons of the ninja world. Any one member of the group appearing would be cause for most ninja villages to enter a state of panic. The fact that they traveled in pairs would cause all but the strongest of villages to either call their leader to battle or surrender. You didn't see the way he was eyeing Samahata. The little bastard was getting ready to grab it and run, I could tell. However, if one were to analyze the psychological profiles of the average Junin-ranked ninja, one would come to realize that they tended to be a little unhinged. Life as a ninja was stressful, and the stronger you got, the more dangerous and stressful life was. You're afraid some kid can just walk up and take your sword? Be a fucking man and just beat the boy senseless. Or you can just run away like a scared little girl. By the time you reached the level that the average Akatsuki member was at, well, you kind of earned the right to be immature. Several figures stood around the room, some actually there, most not. The group known as Akatsuki was planning its eventual capture of the 9-tailed beasts, to fulfill some grand plan that no one else quite understood. Shut your mouth, Deidara. At least people don't mistake me for a woman. Yeah, they mistake you for a fish. Thus, arguments between members tended to swiftly fall into the category most parents would disparagingly refer to as bickering. Due to rather strict rules about fighting each other, and the fact that neither was actually physically present in the same place at the time, the worst they could do was insult each other. But, as usual, the arguing was swiftly broken up by the leader of the group. Both of you shut up. Just shut up. If Kisame won't go after the Kyuubi, we'll just have to send some other team after them. And since you're so eager to argue with him, Deidara, we'll just switch your 2 teams' targets. Now Itachi and Kisame will go after the Ichibi, and you and Sasori will go after the Kyuubi. Now, for more important news, we've received word that both of those Jinchurikis will be out of their respective home villages for the time being, so we'll. Kisame didn't even try to hide his sigh of relief. He didn't care, really, what others thought of him. One tended to develop rather thick skin as a child when one had, well, thick skin. That was blue, and had gill slits. He did put much value, however, into his sword. If anyone were to take it away from him, well, he wouldn't know what he'd do, but it wouldn't be pretty. It might involve mass murder. Or it might involve death by chocolate ice cream. Maybe both, at the same time, but either way, he was just happy he didn't need to worry about it anymore. The fact that his new target made his home in the exact opposite climate that was optimal for Kisame, as well as being able to wield said climate to devastating effect, didn't bother him in the least. Because Gaara was just known for crushing people with sand, without bothering to take away everything the person felt was precious. Won't Kisame be in for a surprise when he sees who Gaara will be hanging out with? Poor Kisame. It took quite a bit of doing for Jiraiya to accept the Aoi mission. Nothing the Sandaime said could really convince him that he should take out a number of children, 2 of which were Jinchuriki, and 1 of whom was massively unstable, to take out some A-ranked missing nin, and defend them all from possible attack by S-ranked missing nin. No, the 3rd might be the Hokage, but Jiraiya wanted no part of that mission. He'd much rather just take Naruto along and handle it himself, but Sarutobi was adamant that Gaara and his team needed to be taken along, as well. However, Jiraiya was convinced, when Tsunade volunteered to go along as well. The reason she gave was, to keep Jiraiya out of trouble, and to keep an eye on Naruto. The real reason was because the Todoriki Shrine race was a rather large sporting event, and therefore gambling would be involved. The mission request involved protecting the runner of one of the teams, and reports from the area are what alerted the Sandaime to the fact that a Konoha missing nin was being hired by the opposition to help them win. So, Tsunade reasoned, if Naruto the Luck Magnet was being hired to help one of the teams win, and get a new gift for that girl of his. The race was in the bag. It was a gamble that even she couldn't lose. So, faced with both Sarutobi and Tsunade telling him he had to do it, Jiraiya gave in. But, on one condition. Naruto stood, business card in hand. This is where the new Ichiraku's stand is? It was a part of town that he'd only been in when escaping the scene of a Kree air prank. The really nice uber-rich part of town. Naruto had returned to Ichiraku's stand at 6 a.m. the next morning, in hopes of finding out that the whole moving thing was some kind of mean trick someone was playing on him. He found an empty lot, with a box of business cards for the new Ichiraku's, being the only sign that it had ever been there. Ninja moving teams were most efficient, it seemed. It looked as if they had just picked up the whole stand and walked away with it. So, now at 7 a.m., Naruto stood, looking around, hoping to spot the ramen stand he loved so much. And he fell on his knees in joy, when he spotted it on the corner of what he recognized to be Hyuga Land. He knew it to be Hyuga Land because it was one of the worst places to try to hide from anybody. After trying it a time or two, Naruto made sure to remember that hiding in a house full of people who can see through walls is a bad idea. And so, he decided to join the single other customer at the stand in worshipping the spirits in the only way he knew how. Through the divine noodle dish he loved so. Raw amen. But who else would be up so early to eat ramen with Naruto at 7 a.m.? Hiyashi had awoken content this morning. He felt that his sake was now finally safe from intruders. Intruders that could somehow evade the Byakugan were a mighty foe indeed, and it was only his clever daughter who had realized that if the Byakugan could not catch them, then maybe an Aburame insect or Inuzuka nose could. Indeed, Hiyashi's estimation of his elder daughter rose sharply after that. And all she wanted in return was to have a restaurant moved onto some unused portion of their property? Why, that was good business. Why hadn't he ever thought of it himself? Sure, he'd probably not choose a ramen stand, but it was his daughter's idea, and he figured he should encourage this kind of action from her. But it was a sign of Hinata's inexperience that she chose a ramen stand, and not something nicer. No, the thought was there, and Hiyashi was proud of it, but it would take a more refined hand to make this work. No matter where it was, a ramen stand was still a ramen stand. Not a place that the rich and powerful would often want to go to. Snooty people might turn their noses up to the fare, which wouldn't be good for the Hyuga reputation at all. So no, Hiyashi decided, the Hyuga clan couldn't afford to have the reputation of catering to the lower caste of society in their choices of food. So he had to do something to make the stand appealing, to draw in business, and thus increase the Hyuga prestige. And it came to him. Why, I should be seen eating there myself. After all, if I show publicly that I like this food before any negative rumors get started, then I can turn them all into positive ones. That way, other people will want to be like the Hyugases and eat like we do. Which would be ramen. Yes, Hiyashi felt smart indeed, thinking of that. So, informing Hinata that she was to guard the sake in his absence, Hiyashi found himself striding over to the new stand that seemed to be just about to open. And, even just as he sat down, someone else joined him. My plan is working this quickly? Truly, the Hyuga are a clan full of genius. 7 a.m. is when the markets and stalls are beginning their days, a time when more shop workers are present than shoppers. Thus, the early morning was spent gossiping amongst each other, learning the new goings-on of the town. And one wild rumor that was flying about, that was quickly confirmed, was that Uzumaki Naruto and Hyuga Hiyashi seemed to be friends? So you say that miso ramen makes for the best breakfast dish, Yup, it really gets ya going in the morning. Chicken ramen is good for lunch, because it's lighter than beef or pork ramen, which make good dinner dishes. Shrimp ramen is good anytime, really, but since it's more expensive I usually save it for special occasions. Yes, morning miso truly is one of the most traditional dishes, is it not? There are few better ways to start the morning. But I must say, I never thought to combine it with noodles. It creates a very intriguing taste. It's delicious, though I found that the miso needs to be prepared just so, or the noodles and vegetables will interfere with the taste. Naruto continued to ramble on, delighted to finally find someone who seemed to agree with him on the awesomeness of ramen. Even better, this guy appeared to want Naruto to go on and on about everything he knew about ramen. So who was he to deny the man ambrosia? Hiyashi was thanking the gods for blessing him with this child, who apparently knew everything there was to know about his new business, and who didn't even need to be coerced or tricked into teaching Hiyashi about it. Hiyashi would listen, and learn, and make this new information his own. And with that, he would make this ramen stand into something else that people would be envious of the Hyuga over. But the scene, it painted a strange picture for the onlookers. To everyone else watching, it looked as if the two were old friends talking, with how they both seemed to smile and nod and talk enthusiastically. What could it mean? How could the two be friends? If they were, why was Naruto pursuing Tenten and not Hinata? Wild speculation swept through the jewelry district and into Market Square. Naruto was having a formal meeting with Hyuga-sama? He was attempting to plead for Hinata's hand? But wait, what about Tenten? It didn't make sense. People swiftly came to the consensus that this meeting could have nothing to do with Hinata, because that would mean everything they had logicked out about Tenten would be wrong. So what else could Uzumaki Naruto have to do with Hyuga Hiyashi? People began whispering about everything from Naruto earning the right to learn Jukin because he defeated Neji, to Hiyashi somehow holding the secret to who Naruto's parents were. But two things were agreed upon. First, Naruto and Hiyashi were clearly friends of some sort. And second, ramen stands might just become the place to hang out when trolling for gossip. But no one could come up with any one single idea that held enough merit to become the truth. But then, if it didn't make sense, it just meant there was something people didn't know yet. There was some information that no one knew, something that Hiyashi did know, that would somehow let the two be friends. As the villagers pondered the dilemma, Naruto and Hiyashi's breakfast time was coming to a close. Well, Uzumaki-san, I must get on with my daily duties. But I am interested in discussing with you the various intricacies of ramen. We shall continue this conversation next time you come by and eat. As Naruto cheerfully assented, Hiyashi began his walk back into his house. It's perfect. I even have someone to guard the sake whenever I must leave to speak to Uzumaki-san. Hinata, you are beginning to prove your worth to the Hyuga family. Hinata sat alone, by the door to the cellar. Her secret spies amongst the Hyuga household, Neji always did object to being called that, though Hanabi had a blast playing ninja, reported that her father was eating with Naruto. Naruto. Someone other than she was taking advantage of the fact that Naruto was going to be hanging out at her house. Was this a good thing, or a bad thing? It could be good, because her dad might decide he likes Naruto, and that he should marry her, and then Naruto would hug her, and kiss her, and take off his pants. Hinata shook her head a bit at that, took another sip of sake, and resumed thinking. The bad side, unfortunately, was a great threat. Her dad might decide he doesn't like Naruto, and therefore she would never get the chance to hug him, much less take off his pants. Hinata never once contemplated the idea that her father might end up enjoying spending time with Naruto so much that he would monopolize Naruto's ramen time, and not her. Because it was just too silly for her to even think of. But she had to be fast. Her good spy, as opposed to her grumpy one, had just reported that her father was on his way back, so she'd need to put the sake away quick. That was surprisingly little paperwork. I thought we'd be here for hours proving our credentials, but no, they just let us right in. Sloppy work, that. Well, I'm not complaining. I just want to put my stuff down, and take a shower. Then we can find the Hokage and report in for missions. Kankuro and Tamari chatted quietly as they walked to where they had been informed at the gate that quarters had been prepared for them. Gaara followed silently after them. You see, Gaara was thinking. He wasn't stupid. He knew that the people here would recognize him. And seeing as the last thing he had done when he was here was turn into a giant monster and attempt to rampage through the town. Well, he wasn't expecting a warm welcome. But then, he never did. Gaara was trying to figure out what kind of missions they'd be put on. It was stipulated in the loan agreement that the Suna ninjas would take missions as teams, so it's not like the Hokage could just send him off on his own, however easier that might make things for him. But he also didn't expect to spend much time around Konoha, because it was known that he was a Jinchuriki, and therefore a valuable weapon. But what kind of mission would it be? And even as Gaara was lost in thought, and he and his siblings were crossing an intersection, an interesting case of deja vu replayed itself for him. Just like last time he was in Konoha, some random kid just ran into Kankuro. Only this time he knew the guy. So even as Kankuro yelled in surprise and annoyance, Gaara stepped forward. Uzumaki Naruto. The ninja in question, Fresh from picking himself off the ground he had been knocked to, turned and froze. Gaara, what the heck are you doing here? Naruto had been in a rather mad dash, afraid that he'd be late for his second training session with Tenten. The girl seemed rather strict about training, something Naruto wholeheartedly approved of, and he didn't want to disappoint her for some reason. And now, this. Before Naruto could even draw his new sword, or even before Gaara could respond, someone else stepped forward. Hold there, honey. We aren't here to fight. We were dispatched to Konoha to help out with the mission load since the battle. Temari smirked to herself, not expecting to see the boy who needed to be shown the error of his ways so quickly. Sure, she'd prefer to be washed up and in nicer clothes before messing with his head, but if she was going to be given an opportunity, she might as well take it. So Temari subtly applied the basics of what she had learned in her kunoichi courses. She had smiled lightly, placed her hand on his upper arm, and even used a pet name. And Naruto managed to completely ignore it. Even with his newly growing mindset of the possibilities of life with another girl than Sakura, his body was still prepping itself for a fight with Gaara, and thus everything else was ignored. So Naruto contented himself with a light shrug to displace her hand, a quick glance to the side, and then readdressed Gaara. That true? You're here to help? Gaara nodded. Temari fumed. Kankuro chuckled. That's twice she's been blown off. I wish I had a camera. Well, if you guys aren't here to fight, then I gotta go. Got training now. And with that, Naruto was off again. Well, that went well, didn't it, Temari? Not another word, Kankuro, or I'll start telling people whose makeup you first stole for your face paint. Gaara didn't even bother telling the two to stop bickering. He had more important things on his mind. Like how he could help his obviously inept sister at landing Uzumaki. It was clear she wouldn't be able to do it on her own, if Uzumaki could blow her off that easily. This is nice. It was a vision that would have fit well into a martial arts movie training scene. The sun was rising up on a misty morning, wind lightly blowing through a small grove of trees, and two swordsmen were going through a beginner's sword kata in silence. Or rather, a swordsman and a swordswoman, if you want to be politically correct about this sort of thing. Training is usually so hectic and violent. But this is relaxing. Nice. Tenten was thinking similar thoughts, because her training usually wasn't like this, either. All too often it defaulted back to target practice for her, with her teammates getting dodging practice. Her melee skills had gotten a little rusty, but working with Naruto was definitely getting her back into top form. Naruto was picking up the basic stances with ease, and would be ready to start practicing something other than a basic overhead swing or a thrust soon. Tenten was intentionally going slowly with some of his training, just to prolong their time together. She wanted to be sure that she knew Naruto before she could accept any kind of commitment with him, and this was the most painless and least embarrassing way she could think of to do so. And he seemed to be a pretty good guy. Enthusiastic, for sure, and eager to please. Like a less intense version of Lee. No, not less intense. Just, differently focused. Whereas Lee was focused on proving that he himself could be a good ninja without ninjutsu or genjutsu, Naruto was focused on proving that he could be Hokage. At first glance, the two goals are similar. But as Tenten thought more, the differences became increasingly more glaring. For one, Lee's goal was entirely selfish. Not that it was a bad thing, mind you. But it was a solely personal goal that was only directly for his own benefit. In the long run, it could help many people. But that would only be after he had achieved his own goal. Naruto's, on the other hand, was entirely selfless. It seemed to Tenten that Naruto knew exactly what a Hokage's job was, and to whom it was too. The fact that he openly stated that he wanted to be Hokage so that everyone would acknowledge him, and that it would be his job to defend them. Well, that seemed to be a mighty high goal. Of course, if Tenten knew that Naruto's goal was also driven by his desire to be the coolest ninja possible, it might temper her opinion a bit. But then, she doesn't know that. All she knows is that Naruto is extravagant in all he does, and goes about his business in as grand a manner that he could. After all, why else would he kill one of the Mist Seven and Orochimaru himself just to give her a sword? Naruto was thinking something along similar lines. He was happy he had decided to give Tenten the two swords. At the moment, she was using the Kusanagi blade. Naruto tried to picture himself training with Sakura-chan like this. And for some strange reason, he couldn't. Because training with her never went like this. It was always more hectic and angry, and involved Sasuke making snide comments and Kakashi making fun of them, and generally, Naruto felt he had to prove that he was worth training every minute. But here, he had nothing to prove. And that was nice. Naruto stole a glance over at Tenten, who was setting up some kind of practice dummy up against a tree. Man, she sure is different from Sakura-chan. I mean, she puts so much more effort into training. I don't think I've ever even used a training dummy like this. Even as Naruto thought that, Tenten bent over to fasten the bottom of the dummy to the tree, not realizing that it gave Naruto a prime view of her bottom. Naruto quickly turned away before Tenten could straighten up and notice his blushing. If no one had seen it, well, then it would never be spoken of again. However, someone did see it. An Anbu who had been dispatched by the Hokage to collect both Naruto and Tenten for mission purposes arrived on the scene just in time to see Naruto's cheeks turn a rosy red. Connecting the dots, the Anbu smirked. She'd have some good news to pass around the market square tonight when she was off duty, for sure. But for now, she had 2 ninja to collect. I'm what? Yes. Oh god, yes. Yes, Naruto, did you really doubt you'd get promoted after what you did during the exams? We just received word back from the judges both you and Shikamaru were promoted. So, Hokage-sama, why am I here? Naruto and Tenten stood in the Hokage's office. Or rather, Tenten stood. Naruto was off to the side dancing in celebration. Tenten was just confused though. Yes, you're here because you're going on a mission, and the other team who will be on the mission with you requested to have the briefing for it as soon as possible. Before Tenten could ask what the mission was about, and who this other team was, more people entered the room. What are you doing here? Jiraiya-sama said he had a mission for my team? Sakura was a tad confused, and more than a little angry. She had just spent all of yesterday brooding angrily over this girl, and now she's here delaying her mission briefing? And why was Naruto dancing? Before anyone could reply, Tsunade entered the room, followed by Kankuro, Tamari, and Gaara. The Hokage, when everyone had entered, began to speak. Yes, I called you here Naruto. Get over here and stop dancing. Because you 6 are going on a combined mission. One part is a standard protection mission that will be guarding a key personage in T-Country to ensure that their government remains one that is friendly to Konoha. The other part is an assassination mission of a ranked missing nin, Rokusho Aoi.
That's all for now. If you enjoy this video, then please like, share and do comments.